Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, anyone listening to my podcast, I absolutely love you. It's been a while since I've done an episode. I've been traveling. I took 2 months and I traveled to Europe. So we landed in Germany, and then we went from Germany to Czech to Italy, Italy to Czech Republic, Czech to Austria, Austria to the Netherlands, and then from the Netherlands we went to Morocco, and from Morocco we went to Egypt, and Egypt we went to a little island called Mauritius, and then from Mauritius I hit Kenya on the way home, and then I came home. I spent a week with my parents at their place, helping them put a new roof and just really, kind of decompressing the entire trip because, we travel to understand people. We travel to understand their hearts and their minds. We don't go to resorts and we don't plan anything. We choose an Airbnb, and then whatever is in that destination, we kind of search and talk to the locals, and we stay in local areas. And usually Airbnb hosts are great. Like that's one of the best things you can do when you're looking to find a place to be in a new country, is speak to the Airbnb hosts, and they set up all the rides and kind of organize everything, and for fairly local prices as well. Yeah, so we just kind of wanted to get our feet into Europe and understand how people move, how they think, what the language is, what the streets are like, and again, what people's hearts and minds are. I think that's important. We need to understand each other, not judge each other. My friend said to me, he's like, "Oh man, why would you go to Europe? It's full of trash there, like rivers of garbage." And I was like, "What?" I'm like, "Where did you hear that? Like, who told you that there was rivers of garbage in Europe?" He's like, "The TV." And I was like, "Good Lord, this is our, generation." And as probably our parents' generation as well. But this is it, the TV tells the truth. The things we see on TV are what I should believe, so I should be afraid of things I do not know. I think this is why we are in the situation we are in today, with us being a part of the age of division or the age of separation, because that's what we're in. We are literally a part of the age of separation. We are so divided, and it seems you just programmed to judge each other based on language, color, religion, country, cultural practices, like for what size you are, what shoes you wear, what music you listen to, what your partner looks like. It's just wild. It seems it doesn't matter where you come from in the world, like we're programmed to judge each other as an auto response. So we wanted to kind of go over in Europe and see if we had similarities within mental health and addiction. As anyone in America listening to this knows, is quite rampant over here. And we wanted to see, what was happening in other parts of the world. And, obviously, social media or cell phone use is an absolute addiction all around the world. Kids have stopped playing in countries with far less than first world countries, because they can still have access to the internet and a phone. It seems to be readily accessible for most parts of the world, regardless of what their positioning is in the standards of being a first or second or third world country. It's really incredible, to witness that and to see that we have generations of children coming up, with this complete disconnect from understanding who they are, because they're being programmed by TikTok or Instagram or video games or YouTubers, and I think that's not to be judged. I think it's more so beneficial to have an observation surrounding what's going on in the world. Like that is it's just a reality, and I think living in the truth is what sets us free. For many years of my life, I avoided the truth. And what truth was that? My personal truth. The truth of my pain. The truth of my habitual desire to consume substances to distract myself from knowing who I was and what I was capable of doing, because I didn't know how to believe in myself, because nobody taught me that. And the reality is that's happening all over the world. We get lost inside of substances or inside of devices, or some people it's work, it's anything that causes us to distract from our truth. And I think it's really important to see that and to at least be aware of that. You don't have to figure yourself out right away, but just becoming aware of that is highly beneficial. So, when we travel, I share the things that I went through in my life. 23 years of addiction, being homeless on the streets and toxic relationship behaviors and, self-sabotaging towards myself as a defense mechanism for my insecurities. I talk about these things. I'm very vulnerable whenever I travel the world. And whenever I am in the world, I should say, my wife can attest, I'm like this wherever I go. And, it's a beautiful thing. I really, being inside of Europe, we began in Europe. And, many different countries in Europe, they're all very closely connected, yet culturally and traditionally. And there's a lot of change, even in religious practices and whatnot. Not that any of that matters, because those are all belief systems, but it's a reality. So let's talk about it. You would think that you go into certain countries and there would be such differences within the people because of what you visually see on the outside, culturally, traditionally, whether it's clothing, whether it's relationship practices or religions or, whatever it may be. But the reality is when I meet people and when I talk to people, I don't talk to the outside version of them. I look for the light within. I look for that spirit, that essence, that energetic source of love that all of us are. And I look for that, and I'm able to connect with that because I found it within myself. But it's very interesting to see, many races, cultures, traditions within individuals immediately become receptive to a conversation surrounding love, personal growth, emotions, knowing who you are, going for your dreams, and sharing about their dreams, their personal beliefs that most people never ask them. That to me was worth every single dollar that I spent to go on this trip, because it's never about money to me. It's always about an investment. And I invest in myself and I invest in people. And to do that, I have to, travel around and go outside of my boundaries of what is normal or what is comfortable or what I know, within this side of the world. And that was, it paid off. That's really where it paid off. I saw so many beautiful things architecturally or environmentally. Don't get me wrong. I still, I love to snorkel. I love to hike. My wife and I, anything adventurous, like we're absolutely involved in that. But I always travel for the people because I want to share my story, and more so I want to hear other people's stories, and I want to connect to that light within people because it reminds me that we can change the world. That's why I do this podcast. I honestly, I share about things that are on my heart, that are on my mind, that I just feel we all have, and we're all looking to express in one way or another, but we lack communities. We lack the environments to really be ourselves, because authenticity is such a dangerous thing to be because we've got social media that might catch you on the phone, being yourself, and people might judge you for that. So we hide from that, and that's common all over the world. But the reality is, I'll tell you, the reality is that authenticity is your freedom. Because when I'm with people and, I create a space for them to be authentic because I immediately strip it down that there's any fear of judgment, simply because I'm willing to share my story. 23 years of addiction, homelessness. Really, I was just unable to process emotions and communicate about them. That is what created the mental health practices within myself, and the addiction came second. Not processing fear, anxiety, and stress, or experiences that result in the accumulation of those emotions, fear, anxiety, and stress, will have us create patterns and belief systems in our thought processes that are not beneficial to our personal growth or to the operation of living from a place of love. And that's really what we're lacking, is operating from a place of love. We operate from fear. When we are afraid to be ourselves, or afraid that we'll be judged for being ourselves, we are operating from a place of fear. And fear is global. It's within news elements, social media, anything that can grab your attention to pull you away from knowing you are more than what you have to be limited by in this world, or be afraid of in this world. And most times, those fear-mongering media outlets, they're out of our control, and they're things that we do not know. Yet we consume them because it's like fear porn in a sense. But the reality is that's happening globally. We've got wars happening all over the world right now, and it seems to be getting more unstable as we go. But what I have learned is that the power has always been with the people. It's always been in our possession. It's just really being brave and courageous enough to step out of the system. Step out of the system, be yourself, and be guided by your own moral compass that will allow you to learn difficult lessons and have you be accountable for the choices that you made within that difficult lesson, because you realize that difficult lesson was actually a blessing. Because the things that are the hardest to learn teach us the greatest lessons. And I think, often a lot of us, the conversations I was having around the world, is that we're so afraid to make a mistake because it's going to cost us this, or it's going to cost us that, or it's going to cost us something that is unknown. Yet the reality is it costs us the present moment, which is the most priceless thing we all have. This is where we can best affect our future, is by who we are in the moment. But if we're constantly afraid to be our true authentic selves for fear of losing things that have not yet happened, then we forget to grow. And that's a reality. Again, this podcast is called Real Talk for an Unreal World, because I just showcase truths, and I think it's really important to just become aware. A lot of people will say to me like, man, how did you get to the place you were, how did you get to the place you are? It's like, it's inner work is not hard. It's actually quite simple. What I've learned is anything we begin is difficult. Anything. That is where we struggle the most, is because we're often not sure of what to do. And it just makes it very difficult to try and learn where to start. And for me, where I began and what I share with people was being honest to myself and being honest to others. Because anything that I give myself, I will in turn give to others. How we treat ourselves is how we're going to treat others, right? So everything actually begins within, just an awareness and an observation of who we are, who we want to be. You may not know who you are, but it's who you want to be that you can become. And those choices are yours. So for me, I had no idea, who I was when I decided to change my life after surrendering my life to love in that jail cell. You can listen to the previous episodes if you need to, surrounding that story. It was quite beautiful, but it's in there. And the reality of that is that when I surrendered my life to love, it activated a remembrance within myself to know that I was not my past. All of the mistakes and all of the experiences and everything I had done to everyone and everything that everyone had done to me didn't matter. It didn't matter that I had to relive it over and over and over it again. Because what I had to do was look at my past as education. And that made it very simple for me to just look at each mistake I made, why I made it, and apply that education in my present moment. Because I wasn't my past, and I decided to be somebody else right there in that jail cell. So the day before, I was known as a drug addict. The day that I surrendered my life to love, I became Justin, and I had no idea who that was. But I was going to learn what it meant to love myself because I knew I was something more than what I had thought previously. That is a powerful thing when you understand what it means to believe in yourself. Now, you don't have to know what that looks like. You just have to be willing to try. And that is something that connects with individuals all over the world. I, this is the, I kind of laugh because it's so obvious that we are human beings, a part of the human race. We are all curated out of love. Fear is a learned behavior. It's a learned behavior that is embedded from our parents, from our environments, from our communities, from our traumas, or from social media. And any of you that have children that are being offered iPads or iPhones, you may think it's okay to give a 3-year-old an iPhone or an iPad to distract them from what's going on around them or control their emotions. But just remember, that's what you're doing. You're allowing a device with maybe suitable content to program your child based on what that content finds relevant to give your kid. And I don't think that that's parenting in any way, shape, or form. It's actually setting your child up for a great deal of difficulty with attention practices, emotional balance, and education, because the result of always having a distraction in front of you will mean that avoidance is an acceptable part of life. And that's just real. Not to mention, like, there's people whole families that go to restaurants and they're just all on their phone. Like, there's no social interaction anymore. Like, this is becoming normal. So that's not normal to do that, because these are distractions, and it's up to us to be accountable to understand that. So I did understand that when I decided to be somebody new in that jail cell. Again, that's inner work, is basically just becoming aware of the environment that you have created around you, because there is no blame and victim mentality. Not with inner work. There can't be. One way or another, these experiences happen for us. We have to just allow that to take place. And I know some experiences are extremely difficult. I myself have been through some very difficult experiences in my life as well. Physical and sexual abuse are very common these days, but we have to ask ourselves, why we're the ones who went through it. And what I share with people is that because we were the ones strong enough to bring the education to teach other people who are going through this, or who may be victims in the sense of being preyed upon, give them the education that we learned to help them see what to do along their way. That's really purposeful. When you take an emotionally traumatic experience like physical or sexual abuse and you go, okay, what can I do with this? All I want to do is hate someone. All I want to do is blame somebody for something that was out of my control. But in reality, this life experience is very strange how we learn. It's not my design, but it's the reality that we're living in. So we have to do something with what we have, because trying to change things that are out of our control will just make us tired. And I think a lot of us want to do that. We want to change things that are out of our control, but it gets us nowhere because they're not in our control. So what can we do with what we have? That's where our attention should be. What can I do with what I have within me? And any difficult experience that any of us have been through is education for another. So to begin to be able to repurpose how you look at an experience and how you talk about an experience, take yourself out of the blame and victim mentality and put yourself more into a power position, that's you taking back your power. And honestly, that's a requirement, because otherwise you just stay stale, and you need this cause for distraction, because it's very uncomfortable to process these feelings because we don't know how. It's like you just feel like these things happened to you, and therefore you cannot move past them because the emotion is too great. But repurpose that, man. Every single one of you has a warrior spirit living within you. Again, when I was talking before about how I speak to the spirit or the essence of love within every single individual, that is who you are. This avatar that is containing the light is just that. It's just a container. It just holds the light so that it's able to have a physical experience. And that physical experience allows that piece of light to learn about sometimes very wonderful emotional experiences and sometimes very difficult emotional experiences. But the reality is that when we learn difficult things, we evolve if we're willing to learn from it. Now, if you're too afraid to learn from it because you can't face it, or you refuse to face it, or you won't face it, then you will stay in that abused state. In that abused state where self-sabotage will be a very relevant part of your life, because you don't know your worth and value. And honestly, that's a big thing. Like, not knowing our worth and value. I kind of giggle when I say that, because it's one of the biggest things. I consume drugs, and a lot of us consume drugs or social media or video games because we just don't know what we can do in this life. It's easier to be distracted by something than tap into that power that we have within ourselves. If I say to you, like, you're a warrior spirit, like, you are a warrior spirit, think about that. That is a powerful, beautiful, wonderful tool. It's an instrument, really. Every single one of us is an instrument. And the more you tune your instrument, the better you are going to perform in this life. And you're not acting for anyone, but what we are here to do is evolve. And that's a reality. So your evolution is your requirement in this life. So that instrument that you are can be finely tuned to a high vibrational frequency. And that can be done through some simple processes, such as forgiveness. I'll tell you, I've been through a lot in my life. 23 years in active drug addiction, relationship with individuals that I never loved, yet I pretended to give them something that was never real in the first place, created so much relationship toxicities that were abnormal. The trauma of living on the streets and the things that happened out there. You look at all that, and it may be hard to say, well, how can you forgive? I lost children as well within this collection of years there. Because of my addiction and my fault. I don't blame anyone for my actions. I did at the time, which allowed me to stay within my addictive state, or my state of consumption of distractions. But the reality was, when I chose to be somebody different, I decided to forgive myself first. Like, that was one of the first things I did, because forgiving myself allowed me to forgive others. It had already happened, all of the trauma and all of the experience. So holding on to things that had already happened was a big part of the reason why I wasn't growing forward. It was one of the big reasons that kept me down. And I realized that no one was doing that but me. And I think that was a really important awareness. Again, awareness is always one of the first steps. Because once we become aware, we know what we've got to do with what we have in front of us, and you just baby steps. Like, that's why I say forgiveness is just a simple tool we can use for ourselves first. And that really was how I processed my entire past. People say to me, like, how long did it take you to do that? Well, I did it in like 5 minutes because I thought about everything that had already happened to me, all of it. And everything that I had done to everyone. And because that happened yesterday, and I decided to be somebody new in that present moment in that jail cell, there was no use in carrying it anymore. I had to let it go. I had to let it go because it didn't serve a purpose. There was no purpose inside of it. So I knew that. So it freed me of that right there in that moment. And I knew that if I was going to be better, and I was going to be remembered as something as more than a drug addict, regardless if I made that decision that day in that jail cell, I knew my actions would speak louder than my words. And I can tell you today, like, I meet people and they're like, I say this to everyone, my story about being a heroin addict or a drug addict for 23 years and using a needle, for 16 years, and being homeless on the streets for, quite some time. And they look at me and they're like, there's no way. Like, there's no way, man, that you went through that. They cannot believe that the guy in front of them is the guy that I'm talking about. And I think that's a really important thing to share. Like, you can be anybody you want in this life. It doesn't matter who you were yesterday. Your actions will speak louder than your words. And always put that action within yourself before you do things for other people, because that's where it matters most. I mean, when I got out of jail homeless, after I served my time, I had to go live in a drug house, for 3 days because I had nowhere to go. I had nobody, man. I had nobody, I had nothing. So I had to learn that on my own. But I decided to understand who I was, and learn what it meant to love myself and to believe in myself. So I never had any use for the drugs anymore. I never had any use for the abuse anymore because I had decided to take a chance on myself, something I'd never done before. And because I was able to let go of my past, it made it easier to do that. And the first thing I had to do when I got out of jail with $1,000 in my pocket was go right into the drug addiction world. But I faced it. I faced it because I never walked alone anymore. Because one of the other tools that I used was acceptance. And I had accepted myself for all that I was, but more so all that I am in the present moment. And that was a beautiful thing. Because when I accepted myself, I knew who I was today. I knew who I was yesterday, but it meant more who I was today that I could move forward in life. I didn't need to be the identity or the version of myself that I was yesterday because I had let that person go, because I was learning about a new individual and my actions were going to be the consequences of my choices. So I knew this. I knew by repeating a mistake for 23 years that got me nowhere because I was blaming other people for not having the ability to talk about how I felt or to understand who I was not going to serve me within this new version of myself. And that's it. The other tool there is accountability. So I was accountable for my choices and accountable for the consequences of those choices as well. But I knew, because I was aware, that choosing drugs as a distraction would just mean that I never loved myself. And I truly believed that I was more and that I could be more because I was ready to discover my worth and value. And let me tell you, when you do that, when you make those choices, it was greater than any drug I'd ever done. Like when I chose myself and I chose to leave that hotel room with all those drugs in it and all those people, and I walked out of there and I was like, nope, that's it. Let's figure this out. You know what I mean? This is a new road. This is a new chapter. That was one of the greatest feelings I've ever had in my life. And it was because I chose myself and I chose love. And I knew by believing in myself and choosing love and being honest and being authentic and forgiving myself and forgiving others and being kind, I was going to go far. Kindness is a very wonderful tool in inner work. We got to be kind to ourselves. And I'll talk about kindness for a second. You're going to make mistakes along this journey. It's a part of it. People are so afraid to make mistakes because we have this idea of perfectionism or afraid to be judged. I think, and I think that we judge ourselves more than other people judge us. So I think that's interesting within itself, why we're so afraid to be kind to ourselves. I think that's something that we can all reflect on in this moment. Why it's so difficult to be kind to ourselves, because that is one of the most simplest tools within inner work. Yet for most, it just seems so difficult to do. And again, it comes back to worth and value, and I understand that. But having that time to take moments to reflect, again, connects you to the awareness. And the awareness is what the distractions are there to disconnect you from. As long as you're distracted, you're disconnected from becoming aware of the things that you need in this life, not the things that you want, because we need to be kind to ourselves. We need to be accountable. We need to be aware. We need to forgive. These are requirements in life for personal growth and evolution. And that's what we're here to do. So I think that it's just really important to have these conversations. And I love sharing from a personal experience of how I got myself through this, because a lot of people ask me that, and that kindness to myself took me very far in this life. But in one of the furthest places it took me was understanding that making those mistakes was going to be an integral part of this journey. It was through the kindness to myself that I didn't fall back into shame, regret, and guilt. Like shame, regret, and guilt will just keep you in a stale position, just like blame and victim mentality. They are some of the most powerful emotions that humans struggle to get through because it's such a common practice with self-sabotage and self-abuse. Yet when we operate from a place of love, we can very quickly see that there's no time for shame, regret, and guilt. There's just no time for it because you're learning. You're learning about yourself. The people you meet, the experiences you have, the things that you do are going to provide you with education. They'll provide you with an emotion as well. But if you're willing to see life as education, you're going to grow through things quickly and you're holding yourself accountable. So, I mean, you're operating from a place of understanding, right? When you learn about who you are, you're not always going to say the right things. You're not always going to do the right things. And when you're practicing being authentic, you're going to be awkward. I mean, it's just part of it. But anything you practice, you get good at. So in those awkward moments where you say something that you don't like, or I don't know, you're all of a sudden the center of attention where everyone's looking at you like, what did this guy just say? It doesn't matter because it's more important that you took the action to say something. So be kind to yourself because it's part of the inner work. And just that in itself is such a wonderful feeling to just be kind to yourself. It's difficult in the beginning because, you just want to replay and relive this experience that you were just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said that thing. Or, oh, I wonder if that person's ever going to talk to me again. None of that matters. There's 8 billion people on the planet. Like, there's 8 billion people on the planet. It doesn't matter if it never worked out with some individual. It doesn't even matter if it never worked out with a coworker, or somebody that you're close to, because who you are tomorrow will dictate the day. Leave yesterday in the past. You just learn from it. You know what I mean? You got to have fun with this as well. When we're so rigid and we're so structured and we're so, tight because we're afraid, like it's really going to be hard for you. And you have to understand that you're the only one that is holding you back. Not the world, not experiences, nothing. Just you. Because all we're trying to do is understand love. So make that the objective. To understand love, to believe in yourself, and to know who you are. You don't have to know all of that all at once, but remember, honesty, authenticity, forgiveness, kindness, accountability, and awareness, and the ability to allow yourself to make mistakes are going to get you there. That's a beautiful thing right there. This I'm very happy to have shared all of this with you. Anyone who listens to this is a beautiful podcast in the sense that things lined up with the delivery of the message from my heart. Man, I'll tell you, like sometimes you get in front of this camera or you hold this microphone, and even for myself, you get this idea of perfectionism, or you get this idea of like who you're supposed to be. Like it's so strange because labels in life, they're just programmed into things. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting in front of camera. Oh my gosh, I'm holding a microphone. Oh my gosh, I'm going to tell people about the things that are going on inside of me. For me, all I ever really want to do is share a feeling. I just want to share a feeling. And that feeling that I always try to convey is authenticity. And I'm real with you. It's not easy in the beginning. I mean, I've been at this for 5 years. I have made a world of mistakes. Like, I have made a world of mistakes. But I have grown exponentially. I can say that proudly. Very proudly, actually. And that's not something I say that often. Yeah. And that's for me. That's a personal thing I've shared with you right now with me, that sometimes I don't give myself enough credit for what I've done. And I think it just keeps me in check to like always, I'll be real with you. I'm here for self-mastery. Like this is, I have not come back to this life to go through this extreme difficulty, through all of this trauma, through this major sacrifice of many material things and beloved things in this life for nothing. I didn't come here to retire. I came here to understand what self-mastery means for life. And I think that's the ability to move through life with a balanced egotistical state, because ego does serve a function. But I really believe in the balance of all things, in living and operating from the source of love. Now, that being said, with the world we have going on right now, trying to program us to be the lowest vibrational frequency that we can possibly be, by constantly keeping us in a state of fear, anxiety, and stress, division and judgment, like I said, we're in the age of separation. That is a very difficult thing. But let me tell you, when it's difficult, you're going to learn the greatest lessons. So lean into it. And remember, fear, anxiety, and stress in the external world or externally from you is only consumed by you. Guns don't kill people. People kill people. That's how it works. A gun's got to be fired. Just the same way social media has to be consumed and chosen by the individual that's willing to put that into their mental, into their awareness, into their vibrational frequency. Just be mindful of what you take in. Be mindful of the conversations you have with people. Environment and community, very, very important when we're talking about inner work. What you feed your mind is the same as what you feed your body. You have to be very conscious of these things, because even the food you take in will dictate a certain vibrational or emotional state that allows you to operate from. Like high sugar, high fat foods, processed foods. It's designed to keep you in a lower vibrational state, which is why you feel tired after. Or too much sugar is not good for the body, simply because it has you crash, and it's absolutely horrible for the mind and the emotional state, which is why it's so readily available. Again, it keeps people in a low vibrational state, but you have to be the one to take it in. So just remember how much power you actually have. I think that's important. A lot of us feel like everything is so far out of our control, but it's not. They just want you to believe that. I shouldn't say they, because then people say to me, oh, who's they? Well, let's be real. There are corporations on the planet that own a lot. Media outlets are not places for journalism to happen. They're owned by corporations. So these corporations dictate the media that is suitable for what the agenda and the narrative that they're trying to express within their organizations. Because that's what it is. The corporation is an organization. So often, they have learned that fear sells. And what are they after? They're after views. They're after your attention. That's what they're really after. They want your energy. So if you give them that energy, well then, the corporation is successful within its endeavor of what it's trying to do. But I think it's important for us to be mindful. And when we look at things like wars, and, that's very relevant today, a lot of people say to me, like, how do we best affect what's going on? People post things on Facebook or whatever it may be. It's like, yeah, I don't know how far that goes. And to be honest with you, I don't consume any of that information, any of that knowledge. Wars have been around since, the last thousands of years, let's just say, okay, for sake of conversation. But they've been relevant for some individuals to seek more than others. And for some reason, we find this an acceptable term of an inability to reach an agreement. This is, for some reason, allowed to happen. But really, the only thing that gives this a stage for it to continue is us giving it attention. Because if we gave ourselves the same attention we did to consuming this information, and we put as much energy as we did in consuming the information into understanding our self-love practices and unconditional love for ourselves, I can tell you from experience, you will very quickly share the love you cultivate within yourself with the people around you, bringing them to an awareness of the love that they contain within themselves. This unconditional love as a movement will happen rapidly. It will happen so fast, but we need to value it in order to see what it can do in practice. So your practice is actually a way to help the wars that are happening around the world. Now think about that. That is an absolute way to affect what is taking place in the world right now, is not to be afraid. It's to learn how to love yourself and what to do with it. That's some powerful, observations right there. Like it really, really is. And I hope you guys see that. I really do. I hope you see that. And I hope that some of these words and some of this experience that I've shared with you today can be beneficial to your practice in your life. And please feel free to reach out to me. Real Talk for an Unreal World is my Gmail, my Instagram, my TikTok, my Facebook. I don't know. Like you know what I mean? Like social media, man, is hard for me. I do it and I cut up the clips from the podcast and I put them up there. So I'll find like 1 minute, 1.5 minute shorts of things that I talked about within the podcast, and then I'll put them up. So I love that. And I love sharing like personal things that I do with the homeless. Every Sunday we make peanut butter and jam sandwiches for the homeless. We take them down there and we see people. We just go down, we see people, we hear people, and my whole objective is to get them to laugh or to smile or to remember who they are. Because they're much more than what's taking place on the outside. I'm speaking to that warrior spirit, that light within. And I often remind these guys that are down there on the street. I thank them. I'll go up to a group of individuals that have not changed their clothes or had a shower in weeks, and I'll just roll up and I say, you know what, guys? I'm so grateful for you. I say thank you. Thank you for being an example of what strength looks like. Thank you for being an example of how far you can push the body under extreme circumstances. Who am I to judge what this individual is trying to showcase? The reality is that they are an example of strength and the ability to push ourselves further than what we think. That's a beautiful thing, when you see it like that. And their face just lights up because, the perspective of the reality of their situation, to see it from a different angle, is really a beautiful thing to them. And it would be to me, myself included, on the street, had someone had brought that observation to me, because it's true. It's true. I don't need to judge them for the emotional traumas or the inability to process emotions or the lack of environment that we have for addiction or mental health to actually grow beyond the use of pharmaceuticals from. I mean, pharmaceuticals has a place, sure. I'll give it a small portion of that. But love is the medicine. Environment and community is the medicine. Like that is what it requires to overcome addiction. That's why I do what I do. Love is the medicine, connection is the key. That is the thing that you need when traversing emotional traumas or an inability to process emotions or be accountable or aware of who we are. It just takes a community to create a space with examples of what it looks like to persevere and overcome and showcase a new practice of life. That's what I've done with myself. That's just me. That's what I've chose to do. That's who I am. I come first before my companies, before my relationship. I come first. Now, I don't always get that right. I'm very vocal about saying I make mistakes all the time, but I learn from them, and that makes me better. And it's because I allow myself that I've come as far as I've come, and I'm very grateful for that. I can say that, and I see all of us as one, and that's probably one of the greatest blessings I've been given, is because we are all the light within. Never mind the belief systems. The only thing that divides us is belief systems. Whether you're Black, Asian, Mexican, Japanese, Canadian, American, doesn't matter. Like, that's just something that the world told us we were when we came into the world. We are all the energetic source of love that is within the container. That's what we need to be looking at each other for. And that's what we need to be speaking to each other when we're talking to each other. Is the container just goes through experiences, and many different experiences help us evolve through what we come here to evolve through. And for some, that's great difficulty on the street. And for others, that's being completely addicted by overworking and consuming too much money. That's a reality. They're two completely different experiences, yet the results are the same for both. So who are we to judge? We have to just show up for each other and remind ourselves that we're more than money, that we are the power of connection, that we are the power of evolution, that we are love. Yeah, it's just so amazing. Like I'm so grateful for what I have in me, what I work for. I work for this. I work for this. Yes, I have a job. You know, I have to do things as well that I'm not overly thrilled about doing. I work for myself, so I'm grateful for that. But yeah, man, like this is where I go to work every day. Okay, I'm gonna throw this down because a lot of us got to do 9 to 5 jobs. Okay, and that is a prison sentence. We know it. How many of us are going to jobs that we do not want to go to, even if we pretend to like it, we still don't want to do it, for 50 weeks of the year. Like, that's crazy. You only get 2 weeks a year or 3 weeks a year or whatever it is, and for a minimal amount of money. I will share this with you. My work, we own a construction company, and some days can be extremely difficult. But those days of extreme difficult, I lean into it, and I am observing myself and who I am in those moments. Am I going to become reactive because I'm frustrated and because I'm not communicating about how I'm feeling? Or am I going to change the entire environment within the community that I'm working with by not allowing the world's frustrations to affect me and just showing up and doing the best I can with what I have? I am a being of love before I am an employee. And that's really important to remember. When you go to work, of course, you're going to do things you don't want to do, but who are you at work? Who are you? Are you the one that has continued to wear the identity or the mask that you created to please others? Or are you willing to take that mask off, be yourself, and allow people to see you for the light within? Because let me tell you, it is very, very attractive. It's very attractive when people see other people becoming themselves. I'm going to leave that with you. Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I do. I like that. I just sit here and talk about things. You know what I mean? Like, this is who I am. Like, this is who I am. I don't consume media, this kind of stuff. I don't play video games. I don't know none of that stuff. I'm just a child of the earth, and I say that because it's true. Um, I just I just love life, man. I love life, and it's not always easy. It's hard. It's hard, but I love the opportunity to experience and to learn and to try new things. So I love that, and I'll share that with you. I'm trying to think of what else I can share with you in terms of media at this point. I think, like, is there other things I should say? I don't know. Um, Share my stuff, please. If you think that this stuff can help somebody else, please, please share it. Talk about it. I'm real. This is who I am. Everything I've got going on coming up is a big deal. Because it's a big deal because I'm not afraid. I don't live in fear. I don't have. I can't say I don't have fear because I'm always trying to overcome and better myself. But I am able to process things very quickly and see myself as something more. So the limitation of fear is just an opportunity for me to grow beyond that limitation of fear. And I'm very okay with doing that and becoming more powerful in the sense that I'm not afraid, and I love that. And I talk about that. We're going to talk about many different ways of inner work in the coming episodes, and always, I bring people on, and I'll bring people on because I want you to learn from other experiences more than just my own, and that's important. It's a collective consciousness. There's 8 billion people on the planet. Let's bring some real people in who've been through some real things and have some conversations. Let's do this together. I think that's really important, and I love that. So I'm introducing that for you as well. You got a cool story or something like that, hit me up. They don't all make it on, but I do my best to get what I can out there and try and keep that going. So keep it relevant. What else? I'm going to talk about the course we've got coming up. I have an evolutionary process of overcoming fear using love, basically through the guidelines of everything that worked for me in my life, but they're just practices and experiences. And I think I just offer more of guidance of what that looks like. So I'm going to talk about that more later, but I just bring that up right now. Just be ready for that. That's going to come out in January. And it's going to be really beautiful because I talk about communities, environment, and this is what I've created. or what I'm creating, is an environment and a community for people to come and actually, those that are willing and ready and able, like I'm speaking to you, those that are willing, ready, and able. I'm building something that's going to offer you some guidelines, some awareness, some consciousness to how to traverse your life. Because it's not my way, it's your way. But let me tell you, I had nobody along my way. I had to learn everything on my own. And I can remember at some moments saying to my wife, being like, why? Like, why don't I have a mentor? Why don't I have a teacher? But what I realized is I was my teacher, as you will be too. But I'm going to help you like understand a few things that I was very grateful to have been given, I guess, just through a conscious awareness of connection. Almost, I don't know, it's just like I just knew things all of a sudden. But I think that happened to share with you as well. So I'm not special. I'm not unique. What all I did was I surrendered my love. Well, I surrendered my love to Jesus. That's a whole nother story. But like, I'm not religious at all because I don't believe in religions. But I am spiritual. And I do believe we all have the power to make an example out of our life. And really the only thing I know of Jesus is that the man was an example of unconditional love by sharing time and energy and wisdom with people that he loved, which was everyone. So that's my connection with that. But by surrendering my love to Jesus, I had this activation happen. And I often sometimes say surrendering my life to love because that's what it is. It's just love. And I think it's a easier way to talk about it. And the frequency of love does not mind if you talk about it that way because it's looking to connect with each and every one of you. But the reality is that's the truth. And that's why I do what I do. And that's why I am who I am. So hopefully, this aligns with you wanting to become the best version of yourself as well, for however that looks for you, because that's all that's important to me is understanding that and moving through our past and seeing traumas as something that really can be wonderful assets for yourself and for others. And I'm going to help you through that. So I'm going to leave it here. Lots of love to you. I appreciate you all so much. Really, I do. It's a beautiful thing when we come together and we have these kind of conversations, and more so your practice. I'm going to leave that with you. Your practice is going to be your most important thing. You don't need to just consume all this information. I often tell people, read a book and then read the book again, but act it out. You really want to know something? Take action. That's always going to teach you more than just consuming information. That's the problem, is that we consume. We're in the age of consumerism as well, right? But act. Take action. So anything that aligned with you in this podcast, listen to it a couple times if you have to. Check out the social medias. I'm going to put up shorts and reels from things I find cool or things that can help people within the podcast. And you can connect with that on my social medias, and maybe that'll be what you need throughout the week. Lots of love. Appreciate you. This was great. We got lots of more cool things coming up, and I feel good to be back. Truly blessed. Much love.